This is a Flying Cow production.
There was a man named Worrell, Ernest P. Worrell. Let's celebrate this cat.
Well, hello, and welcome back to Around the Worrell, our Patreon exclusive podcast where we talk all things Ernest P. Worrell. I, of course, am the Flying Cow himself, Clay Johnson, and here with me, as always, is my co-host for this podcast, the litigator, Loren Collins. Loren, how are you, sir?
Doing good, Clay. Glad that my this past week's congestion cleared up in time to record a podcast.
Right?
Yes.
Right? Oh, geez, yeah. I've been dealing with, I don't know if anybody can hear, but I've been dealing with a little bit as well. I will say my main problem though is that it's cold season and I love ice cream. And it's really hard to not eat ice cream.
Yeah.
I'm like, I know I probably shouldn't, but it's just really good.
Oh, good.
Yes. All right. Well, we're not here to talk about ice cream, though. We are here to talk about Ernest movies. In particular, today, we are discussing Ernest Rides Again. I think you and I both kind of talked about going into this that, I believe the last one you had seen was the last movie, and this is the last one I have seen.
Yes, I'd seen Ernest Scared Stupid any number of times growing up. I had never seen this film. I've never seen any of the subsequent Ernest films.
Right. But this film is from 1993. And it was, of course, again, directed by John Cherry. This time with a screenplay by John Cherry and William Akers. I believe this is the only one that Coke Sam's didn't write, or among them anyway. And let's see, music by Bruce Arntzen again and Kirby Shellstad. And of course, it starred Jim Varney, Ron K. James, Jeffrey Pillars, Duke Ernsberger, Linda Cash, and many more. Let's just kind of get into, because like you said, you don't have a background with this. Had you heard of this? Were you aware that this one existed?
Before we started the podcast, yes, I was aware this film existed.
Mhm.
I didn't know much of anything of what it was about.
Sure.
I obviously never recalled seeing any ads for it.
Yeah.
I suppose it's possible I might have seen it on the shelf back at Blockbuster back in the day, but I don't remember that either.
Right.
I really had no impression of this other than the fact that it existed, and I frankly thought it was just a direct-to-video film.
Right. Yeah. I think for a lot of people, that's what it ended up being.
Yes.
I will say I also do not remember ever seeing ads for this film.
Nope.
In fact, the one reason that I knew it was out is when I was a kid, we had I lived like 15 miles from any sort of town and 20 miles from the nearest movie theater. But we would often go into town, and entering town and leaving town, there was a complex with a movie theater right there as you first entered into town. And there was one of the big marquees that would tell you what was playing. And I remember catching on the way out of town, seeing on the sign, Ernest Rides Again. And I was like, oh, there's a new Ernest movie. I'd like to try and go see that. The next time we came into town, which was maybe a week later, it was not there anymore. And so like that was the only inclination that I had that number one, that there was a new Ernest movie.
Mhm.
Number two, that it had ever been in theaters.
Yep.
I will say, could you look up real quick to
Sure.
find out what the budget was for
Ooh, the budget was,
Box
I have it here.
gross, but
Um,
do not have.
It doesn't say it on Wikipedia. Let me see if
Okay,
Box Office
no,
Mojo.
it doesn't. That's what I've got up.
You got Box Office Mojo up? Okay.
No. I've just got the Wikipedia.
Oh, okay. Let me see here.
I will say it overall grossed only 1.4 million.
Yeah, with less than $1 million in the opening weekend.
Yeah, it was $905,000 in the
Yeah.
opening weekend. So yeah, less than a million.
No, but Box Office Mojo does not have a
The budget.
no.
I mean, the previous films had been budgets around what, like 9 million,
That sounds about right. Yeah.
8-9 million.
This certainly feels cheaper than that.
Yeah. Obviously, this is after their relationship with Disney with Touchstone.
Mhm.
So it's much more of an independent situation. So I mean, yeah, they're obviously, like you said, it is does have a cheaper look to it. I will say though, they have a cannon in it. So it
Yes.
can't be like 100% shoestring budget. They did have some sort of backing for this.
I mean, yeah, it's a big prop. There is a lot of outside shooting in it. It doesn't look, it doesn't look quite as good as the outside footage in Ernest Goes to Camp. I'll say that.
Right.
But it's not like they shot it all on sound stages and interiors. And a lot of stuff's moving. I mean, that's probably where a decent amount of the budget went, I imagine.
Yeah.
But by the way, since you had me pull up Box Office Mojo, I rediscovered something I had discovered before, and I'm glad I found again. That 905,000 when Ernest Rides Again, its premiere weekend, which I'm guessing is the only time it was in the top 20. Opening weekend, it was number 16 at the box office. But what was it directly ahead of? What was it number 17 that weekend? Was Jurassic Park. Now,
oh geez,
why did Ernest Rides Again outgross Jurassic Park? That is because Jurassic Park was in its 23rd weekend at the box office.
But we can still say that Ernest Rides Again beat Jurassic Park in its opening weekend.
Also, just behind Jurassic Park was the opening weekend. So again, not like the 23rd weekend, but the opening weekend of The Piano.
Oh,
now,
wow.
If you're curious why The Piano is down that far, that is because Ernest Rides Again opened in 1,190 theaters, and The Piano opened in 4. So,
wow. Okay.
And it so it grossed $151,000 in 4 theaters.
Yeah. I will say,
give a comparison there because it gives this data. The Piano was $37,000 per theater. Jurassic Park was $1,400 per theater. Ernest Rides Again, $760 per theater.
Jeez.
It is the lowest number on this entire list.
Yeah. And I will say they do not want you to know the budget for this film.
Yeah.
Because I've checked several different sites,
and
none of them will tell me. So yeah, we can't compare. I mean, obviously, even compared to, there was a downward slope with, Ernest Scared Stupid. This is, to this point, the lowest grossing of all of the theatrically released Ernest films.
Oh, yeah, because, I mean, Ernest Scared Stupid still made, I think, like, over 20.
Yeah, I mean, it's
no,
still...
It made 14.
It made 14.
Yeah,
right.
It made its budget back.
It made more than its budget back.
Yeah.
It didn't quite double its budget, though, which I think is probably one of the reasons that they let it go.
I'm sure.
That they let the franchise
this
go.
This is an unequivocal bomb. Yes.
Right. Yeah. I mean, but again, it seems like it was only in theaters for like a weekend or two.
Well, yes, but
So
if it opens at $905,000, like it's
sure,
no,
sure,
no
it's
theater
probably
wants
not going to
to.
gain a whole lot of ground. Yeah,
No, no, this did not have the makings of being, My Big Fat Greek Wedding, where it was suddenly just going to spread by word of mouth and just
right, right,
stay in theaters for half a year.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, I will say though, even though this was, did have its very short theatrical run, and then basically anybody else that saw it would have seen it on home video. I didn't own it. I think I recorded it off of television.
Yep.
But so I did have a copy of it. But yeah, I saw it as a kid, and I do remember recognizing, okay, this is kind of a lesser production, even as, I mean, I would have been 11, well, 10 or 11 when this was in theaters, probably 12 by the time I saw it, 11 or 12 by the time I saw it. But yeah, I do remember thinking, okay, yeah, this is definitely a cheaper production, a lesser known film, but I do remember having fun with this film. Especially some of the Ernest stuff and some of the more character-y things that he does in this, because we've talked about before that different films kind of handle his characters a little differently.
Yep.
This one kind of does a mix of both. Because in the past we've talked about how sometimes he uses characters as like Ernest specifically switches into these characters to get himself out of a situation or to trick someone. So it's a device.
Yeah.
And then there's also been times where it's like, okay, it almost seems like Ernest has multiple personalities, or he's just like switching into these characters for fun or something like that. And like I said, this movie tries to do both. Little bit more of the latter at the beginning, and then really we only see one instance of the former with the Auntie Nelda scene.
Yeah.
But still, there is a little bit of both in there. But I will say, different from Ernest Scared Stupid, where he switched characters. In this one, we actually watch him change characters. He does kind of like a Gollum thing, where the characters are almost talking to each other, because there's that opening scene at the construction site, which I want to talk about in a little bit. But that opening scene where no, it's not there. It's when he first goes to meet the professor, and he's digging around and trying to find a map. And he has a conversation between two characters, but we watch him switch back and forth. He's like, "Oh, don't tell me you lost the bloody map. Oh, no, sir. It's here somewhere." And we literally watch him switch, but these characters are having a conversation to the point where I was like, I don't really know. Like, Ernest in this one, we talked about in the other ones, which is one of the reasons why we created the idea of the Worrelliverse, the Ernest multiverse, because in every one of them, he seems to have a job that he is 100% dedicated to, that he has a goal that he wants to achieve, and by the end, he often achieves it. They're usually very modest goals. So, but they do seem difficult for him to do. So it's, he is achieving something when he does get them. But in this one, his character number one seems more childlike even than his previous character. His previous instances in the role, because he's actively playing make-believe. Whereas before, if he was doing something like that, it was with a child.
And like you said, like the other films, at least up till now, have generally put Ernest in some kind of profession, some kind of at least adult profession. he may not be good at it. It may not be a terribly skilled one, but it's
Right.
something that he cares about, and that's what that's what the
Well,
community.
and he has some
role.
sort of professional goal.
Yes.
Whereas in this one, I feel like his goal, if he has a job, we don't know about it, but his goal, or really it's more his dream,
Yeah.
is just to be Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
And specifically Indiana Jones, because he references Indiana Jones several times.
Yeah. No, I think for some reason I think he might be. Yeah, he is a janitor. It says here on Wikipedia he is a janitor, but it's really incidental. The
We
point
never
of him being
see it.
janitor is just to put him at the college in the and no Dr. Mellon. Like other than that, the job does not matter.
Here's the thing: do you remember them referencing the fact that he's the janitor of the college?
I feel
We
like
never see him working.
we again, we never see him working. We never. I do feel like there is something in the film that hints at that.
Well, because here's the
But
thing:
I don't remember what. But,
Yeah,
regardless, you're right. It does not matter to the film. The point is just to put him in the atmosphere, in the environment of the college, and then have Mellon kick off the plot with all of Mellon's material.
But again, I don't remember any time like you telling me that he is the janitor of the college. This is the first I knew of him in fact, one of my questions was how does he know Dr. Mellon? Why is he hanging out?
Oh yeah,
I mean,
none of that is addressed at all.
The fact that he is the janitor does make sense, but they should have made it clearer that he is the janitor.
Yeah.
Because like I said, this is the first time that I picked up on that, and that's you telling me.
Yeah.
I don't remember any character. His wife could have been like, "Why are you always hanging out with the janitor?" No.
Yeah.
And
again, in the other one,
she doesn't like that he's hanging out with Ernest because Ernest is a goof and kind of a screw up in their eyes.
Yeah.
But that's the only reference that she makes. She never says anything about his profession or the fact that he's the janitor at the college. Or
like we said, in every other film, the plot in some way, his job, his profession, in some way drives the plot.
Right.
He goes to camp. He wants to be a counselor. That's what he's doing. He picks up Santa Claus. He he works in the bank.
Right.
He ends up out at her house because of all the junk. That's a little more tangential, to be honest. But just to justify him getting out there. But no, in this one, like they just it's really incidental. It's just to have him there on the campus, and then everything else concerns the professor, not Ernest himself. Ernest is just along for the ride, like the title suggests.
But again, even in that way, it's not successful because they don't ever make a point of saying that that's why he's there.
Yeah. All of it doesn't matter. I do wish, and I think I briefly tried to look this up. He's at J. Quinton University, and I'm curious, in the same way that like the jail in Ernest Goes to Jail had an odd title, which was named after, I forget, like a grip or something like that.
Sure.
I wondered if J. Quinton University is similarly named after just some person who worked on an Ernest movie.
Could be.
Yeah.
Could be. I do say I do want to go ahead and, for those people who have not seen the movie, just give them a cursory plot of what this is about. Like we said, Ernest Rides Again. Basically, the idea is that Ernest is, I guess when we see him, he's just like adventuring, looking for things, and he stumbles across a piece of stone that he takes then to his friend, Dr. I don't know why I couldn't remember his name. Dr. Abner Mellon, played by Ron James, or Ron K. James, as he's credited in this. But he and Dr. Abner Mellon is, a professor of history, who basically has this theory that the crown jewels that currently reside in England are not the real crown jewels, that at some point during the Revolutionary War, they were actually stolen by revolutionaries and stuck inside of a gigantic cannon, and that's where they still are. And of course, because he has no proof for this, he is a laughingstock. And he is basically on trying to find people that believe him. There is another professor, a Dr. Radner Glencliffe, who does believe him, but we discover later it's for nefarious means because he just wants to get a hold of the jewels. They do eventually discover the cannon, and then hijinks ensue. Yeah. I will say the British government also gets tipped off about this theory and are after them as well. But yeah, that is the main plot.
Yeah.
And so that is basically what is going on. You know, I will say, you know, the first scene of the film is Ernest, you know, he's doing his little character shtick, going, and you know, he's, you know, setting up like he is an adventurer, an explorer, and you know, it sounds like he's gonna open up these bushes and we're gonna reveal that he's at like some hidden temple or something like that. But of course, he opens up the bushes and it's like a construction site and did you catch what they were building? Because it looks kind of like a house, but a large house.
No, I just figured it was just a perfectly ordinary house. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I for some reason, Avondale Estates is in my head, but I don't know if that's actually what this sign said, or if that's just what I'm putting in there in my memory. But yeah, it does look like they're just building a house as part of a you know, an estate.
There's a concrete foundation. There's framework up, and that's literally all it's did. And it's only one house. It's not a neighborhood. It's just this one.
No.
House.
At least not any that we see close by. You know, they might be working on constructing a neighborhood, and this is just the first one. But yes, as of right now, this is the one house that they are working on. And he keeps referring to the construction workers as Makita warriors. I don't know where the term Makita warriors comes from, but he does keep referring to them as that. I will say, at least they have him come out with like a metal detector.
Yeah.
And of course, it is a very Ernest style metal detector. It's got like some weird wires and stuff coming off of it. Yeah, exactly. Looks like he probably built it himself, which again, he's apparently a mechanical genius. And you know, and a complete idiot in other ways. But yeah, we're used to that with Ernest by this point. But yes, he goes to the construction site, and my first thought is we are never clued in as to specifically why he's at this construction site. I mean, I almost would have preferred it if he was just like looking for treasure and, you know, just happened to like this be but the way that they frame it at the beginning, it's like this is what he's been looking for the whole time.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that doesn't really make sense.
No, I took it like you were saying earlier. This film in some ways plays him as even more childish. It's like it plays to me at the beginning like a child playing make believe. Like
that's 100% what he is. And I was like, this would have read better if he was hanging out with a kid and he, you know, because before, when he has done this type of thing before, but it was always in the service of a child or, you know, he's never 100% just been playing make-believe by himself to the point where we're kind of questioning, you know, his
at least
he in a full delusional state,
there
or
was an
you know,
episode of Paper and It's Ernest where he's doing like a pirate treasure hunt, which is about on this level, where he's like going around his own house looking for buried treasure.
Yeah. But I mean, within this, he is specifically picking up trash and calling it diamonds.
Yeah.
And
no, again,
it's like
it plays like make believe. It's an odd way to begin the film. It's never quite explained, but yeah.
Yeah. I will say one of the first things that he says he's looking for is Cleopatra's crystal skull. And I just wrote down he's looking for the crystal skull. That's never a good sign.
Yeah.
Of course, this predates Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull by, oh geez, that came out in like 2008,
Well,
I
it
believe.
does. But, I mean, crystal skulls are a separate thing that Indiana Jones is pulling from. So
Sure, right. I'm sure.
Are there
I'm
any
sure.
legend of
But still, I
Cleopatra?
think, well, what I think it's funny that he is constantly referencing
Oh, yeah.
Indiana Jones.
Yes.
And then also
and
looking for the Crystal
But
Skull
foreshadowing
15
that.
years before Indiana Jones himself would be looking for the Crystal Skull.
True. Exactly. Man, has it been 15 years since Crystal Skull? I think it has.
I mean, from here to now, I don't know. I'm just saying from when
Well,
this movie
Christ.
came out to when that movie came out was 15 years.
Yeah. But it's
Um,
been 30 years since this film.
Has it?
2000.
Oh, yeah.
It has been 15 years since Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
Yeah. Wow. So Crystal Skull is the midpoint between this movie and where we are right now.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
You know what? The timing of this was just kind of it's when
That's
it happened.
exactly, yes.
But yeah, the fact that we are talking about this year, yeah. Happy 30-year anniversary for Ernest Rides Again.
Exactly. Finally gets its due.
I mean, I will say technically it's not till November.
Yeah.
Because that's when the film originally came out.
Yeah.
But still, it's the 30th year. Let's see how many people are celebrating.
Yes.
But yeah,
Future
so
podcast, we will go through all the episodes of Young Indiana Jones Chronicles. It's
oh, but yeah, so you know, it is he's very childlike, but
Yes.
at the end of it, or at some point, his metal detector gets some weird electrical, like he turns it like way too high, and somehow that gives off some electrical charge that then brings all of the power tools around him, which some of which are unplugged,
Yeah.
to life. So then he
that's the
is.
problem, that they're not plugged in making this scene.
I mean, here's the thing.
Yeah.
In a vacuum, this scene is actually kind of fun.
It's one of the better scenes in the movie, to be honest. Like, as I was watching it, I thought, like, this isn't a great way. This is not a strong start to this movie. And by the
Yeah.
time I got to the end, it's like, man, I wish we had more scenes like the ones where the power tools chased Ernest around.
Yeah, well, I will say once again, overall, the Ernest stuff in this film is the best stuff in the film. Because I mean, there might be a couple of jokes here and there that I don't think are as funny as some of the others, but I can't think of a bad, like, Ernest beat in this film.
Yeah.
Can you? Off the top of your head?
A
I mean, there
bad
might be some that are
Ernest
middling, but I can't think of any bad, like, Ernest bits.
Not
in this film.
immediately come to mind, but I mean,
Yeah.
I just generally found them subpar.
Sure. I mean, yeah, like I said, there are definitely some that are middling, but
Yeah.
there were genuinely some that I was like, that's funny.
Yeah.
I like this bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, as a film, it's a little weak.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wrote down, I was like, and I mean, I guess when I was going into this, I was racking my brain trying to figure out how this scene tied to the rest of the film, because the main action of it doesn't.
No.
It's really only the very last bit of the scene where he finds the plate that then kicks off everything else that really kind of fits this in. But I was like, this would have been fun as just like an Ernest short.
Yeah.
Which caused me to think, oh, they should have just been making some Ernest shorts at this time.
Yeah.
After they lost their backing from Disney, they should have just been putting out Ernest shorts to see. I mean, what's really unfortunate is that this that Jim Varney passed before the popularity of YouTube.
Yeah.
Ernest on YouTube would have been huge. And I mean, we've even mentioned it. Ernest on TikTok
yeah,
would have been huge.
No, all his commercials were Ernest in like 15, 30-second bits. He would have killed on TikTok.
Yeah, because I mean, while I think some of the films we've talked about previously have been successful to varying degrees, we're getting into the point where his films are weaker.
Yeah.
But again, a lot of the Ernest stuff in here, I still find solid.
Yeah.
I mean, again, not to say that it's the best stuff he's ever come out with, but there's still some decent material in here. While some of the other stuff around it isn't.
I'd never thought of it, but the idea of having Ernest shorts, I kind of feel now like Disney and Touchstone dropped the ball there. Because this was a time back in the early 90s, Disney was experimenting with doing some other shorts. They did a couple of Roger Rabbit shorts.
Yep.
They put in front of some films.
Yeah.
I feel like Honey, I Blew Up the Kid had one of those, or some other short.
Sure.
They tried a couple of other like traditional Disney character animated shorts. Oh crap, what was it? There was one that had like a Mickey Frankenstein thing. Pete, I forget what the title of it was. It was kind of horror infused. It's not available anywhere either. I'll look that up in a second.
Wow. Okay.
But no, if all those are for their more true kid films. If they had instead decided like, let's make a bunch of like 5 to 10 minute Ernest P. Worrell shorts and we'll attach them to the beginning of movies, that could have driven stuff to Disney's comedies.
Yeah,
like
because
there could have been Ernest short, like hypothetically, in front of like the Santa Claus.
Sure.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, some of the most effective stuff in this is basically the equivalent of a Mr. Bean short.
Yeah.
His whole bit with the mummy, that's straight up, a Mr. Bean-esque type of bit.
That was one of my favorite bits in the whole film, actually.
It's great.
It was very Mr. Bean, and I liked it.
Yeah. And we've talked about that in other films before. There's some, and I think around this time was when Mr. Bean was coming over to the States. People were seeing more, because I believe the Mr. Bean movie was in the late 90s, like 98, 99, something like that.
That feels about right. Yeah.
So, I feel like this would have been the perfect time to capitalize on for lack of a better term, the American Mr. Bean in earnest.
Yep.
I mean, he'd been doing this for years. We already had our equivalent of Mr. Bean. They just, for some reason, weren't using him in the same way.
Yep. And that
because
having our Mr. Bean, Ernest P. Worrell crossover in game,
Oh, geez, that would have, like, if they had, like, if we'd had a film almost like a Sleepless in Seattle type thing, where they're having their own separate adventures and they're constantly missing each other, and it's not till the end that they actually interact.
Yeah,
that would have been great.
Great.
But yeah, I mean, because like I said, it does somewhat tie in at the end, because the power tools end up destroying this entire house. But in the last bit, he falls with a doorway, and happens to fall specifically where this nameplate is. Now, I will say, I understand when they later find the cannonball somehow in the exact same place. I understand how the cannonball got there, but how the hell did the nameplate?
No, just sloppy screenwriting, honestly.
Yeah. Because it's in the exact same place. Are they telling us that the last time the cannonball got shot, somehow the nameplate came with it?
Yeah.
Because that doesn't make any sense. Or, I mean, it's not really a nameplate. It's an identifying number plate. But still, it doesn't make sense. Especially because they are so close to the surface that he literally falls on them and feels them.
Yeah.
You telling me no one else found these before? They're that close to the surface?
Yep.
Nobody, which means that they were basically just sitting on the surface and somehow they got gradually covered over by soil.
But by like 1 inch of soil. Also,
Yeah.
like,
And
again,
the nameplate was somehow up at the top with the whole cannonball.
again, the haphazard plotting. I wasn't entirely clear why there was a hole. There, like,
Yeah.
maybe there's a structural reason, but it's not clear. But yeah, once again, someone dug a hole. They got within like 1 inch of this thing. Yeah, again, it's all very convenient and sloppy.
Yeah. Yeah.
But no, the problem isn't sloppy. It's just it's just all plot devices, is what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, I mean, you know, we have to talk about the wider world of this film.
By
Because
which you mean the Mr. Bill cartoon at the beginning? No.
I mean, we can mention that because that is that if you I know specifically if you watch it on Peacock, that's still at the beginning of this film.
I watched it on YouTube. It's at the beginning of the film.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is a short,
It is.
which again, you know, that's what Ernest should have been doing right now,
Yep.
is making shorts. But yeah, Mr. Bill, which actually I was honestly surprised that it was at the beginning. It must have also been part of the theatrical release as well.
It was. I can verify that the poster
Because
itself,
Mr. Bill was a somewhat bigger thing around this time.
It was. Yeah, I remember
Yeah.
watching Mr. Bill cartoons.
Yeah.
No, the poster for Ernest Rides Again, the theatrical poster that is on Wikipedia, it says on the
The one
poster,
that we showed at the beginning of this film.
Yes.
It's on there, yeah.
It says at the bottom there's a cartoon short for Mr. Bill Goes to Washington, like in fairly large print, like on the poster.
Yep.
So
Yeah, so I mean, you know, yeah, it's and I mean, of course, Mr. Bill, for people who aren't familiar with Mr. Bill, was basically a clay figure. It was not claymation. This thing did not move. It was super cheap. But it was basically, especially in this one, kind of a play off of Bill Clinton, because it is Mr. Bill Goes to Washington, and they even say that, you know, the come from behind candidate from the town of despair, Bill Clinton came from Hope, Arkansas. Yeah. So yeah, it's definitely, and they basically spend the entire thing, you know, finding different ways to smash Mr. Bill or pour oil on him or different things like that. And yeah, it's just it's some kind of silly. I don't even know if it's straight up satire, because I don't know if they are like I don't know that they're really commenting on Bill Clinton. It's
Not
more
really,
just
no.
yeah. I mean, that would have been more apt towards the end of his term in office.
yeah, we're months into Bill Clinton's first term.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, this came out in 93.
Yeah.
He's only been in office, you know, since the beginning of the year. He was sworn in January 93. So, yeah, you know, and I don't know that all of them were that like clear that it was a play off of Bill Clinton, but this one definitely is.
Yeah.
You know, I haven't seen a lot of other Mr. Bill shorts. I do remember that my mother hated the Mr. Bill shorts because she was like, it's so disrespectful.
Yeah.
And I was like, I mean, okay,
But
whatever.
yeah, as far as I know, I don't recall Mr. Bill specifically having any other shorts that ran in theaters. I could be wrong.
I mean, I do know, I believe there were some Mr. Bill shorts on like SNL.
Well, that's
or
why
like
I remember Mr.
some
Bill
late night,
SNL.
some other late night things. I mean, it was never
as far back as like the 79 season of SNL. Mr. Bill was appearing on SNL.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, it couldn't have been 100% based on Bill Clinton.
In fact, the SNL episodes that Mr. Bill appeared in were all between 1976 and 1981.
Okay.
This is a super late. This is a 12-year later.
So they brought it back because Bill Clinton came into office.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
character spawned a 1986 live action film called Mr. Bill's Real Life Adventures in 86. And then 93 was the first short, I guess, since 81.
Yeah, I will say the short itself is not that funny.
It's not great, no.
No. So I can't imagine it being a film.
I mean, it's a live action TV film. I don't know what starring Peter Scolari as Mr. Bill. It's a live. There's a poster here for it. Like,
Wow.
all right, I got to look into this later. This
Yeah.
is bizarre.
Yeah. We'll have to look more into that, but we do have to get back to
Yes,
the
obviously,
film
this is a huge,
as a whole. But yeah, so we are then introduced to the professor, Dr. Abner Mellon,
yes.
played by Ron K. James, and let's see, Ron James is a Canadian stand-up comedian. Let's see, he doesn't have. I mean, he's done some work in animation.
Yeah.
He had a voice role in Star Wars Ewoks and the RoboCop animated series, and apparently he is the bank security guard in Tommy Boy.
Okay.
But I do believe that this is probably one of his biggest roles in a film.
Probably.
I mean, and here's the thing. There are times that I like him, and there are times that he's nothing.
Yeah.
In this film. And I mean, I will say, and this is going to go towards a lot of the characters in this film. I don't know if the weakness of the character, how much of that is the performance and how much of that is just what they had to work with in the script.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I can tell you, especially him and his wife, played by Linda Cash, are not well-written characters at all. They are, they're very much one note, which is unfortunate, especially in his case, because he's the
co-lead of this film.
I mean, technically, if you could argue that, Ernest Saves Christmas is about Santa Claus, this is almost about him.
Yeah.
But because he is more driving kind of the story of the film more than Ernest.
Yeah.
But he's kind of like Kenny in the last film.
Yep.
There's not a lot to latch onto with this character.
Well, I mean, the thing that to the extent anyone has a character arc in this, the thing that someone wants and they're pursuing, all of that is him.
Right.
All of that is
definitely is him. He definitely is the one with the arc. But like I said, he's mostly one note. He's just this kind of, very quiet, unassuming, oh, I have this idea. Oh, you don't believe it. Oh, okay. Oh, nobody believes me. Nobody likes me.
Yeah.
Like that's really kind of his character in a nutshell. And I just did it for you in 5 seconds.
Yes. Definitely did give me he did give me one of possibly my favorite line in the film.
Sure.
As part of that character portrayal was at some point he says, you guys will be in trouble when my wife finds out.
Yes, that is true. That actually is because and we'll talk about his wife in a second.
Yeah.
But I do want to talk a little bit more about him because I mean, a lot of his better character, or at least I don't want to say better actually, but a lot of his more like, okay, that's something.
Yeah.
Character beats come out of nowhere. Like there's a point at which he has a blow up with Ernest where he's just like, you've ruined my life, blah, 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 blah. And I'm just like, okay, Ernest, especially in this world, has demolished a construction site. He has destroyed a priceless mummy. He, is childish and all of these things. But all of the things that you're currently mad about had absolutely nothing to do with Ernest.
Yeah.
He's like, you lost me my job. You got me on this journey. I'm like, number one, you are the one that actually found the cannon because Ernest was like, there's nothing in here with the cannon right behind him.
Yeah.
So all of and again, if
cut around the actual discovery of the cannon,
right,
like Ernest doesn't see it, and then all of a sudden they both are just talking about it. Like,
yeah, they 100% did not show. It's what, like you said, one scene, Ernest is like, "There's nothing in here" with the cannon right behind him, and then the very next scene, Abner is like, "Oh, it's amazing, it's amazing," and it's like, okay, why did you go in here if he told you there was nothing there?
Yeah.
But yeah, he's yelling at Ernest about all of this stuff, and everything that he's yelling at Ernest, and I'm like, Ernest has made a lot of mistakes in this film, but not those.
No, and that doesn't proceed to be the argument they have, that he's blaming Ernest for his own decisions, but
right, yeah, and I mean, it would have been nice for somebody at some point to have pointed that out, but no, and then the very next scene that he has is, he's walking away defeated, and his wife, Nan, played by Linda Cash, is basically just like, oh, you know what, you don't need that Ernest anyway, he's never done anything good for you. And he's like, actually he's done a lot for me. And I'm like, when? Where?
There's the sense there's the sense that the characters have a history together of like some kind of weird Marty McFly, Doc Brown type relationship going here.
Right, and definitely Ernest is constantly hanging around him, that kind of thing. But we don't see a lot. I mean,
we don't see
I will say, yes, he does kind of get him to do some more adventurous things that he wouldn't have done.
Yeah.
But it then does lead to a lot of destruction and things like that. But his 180 of, in one breath, blaming Ernest for everything that went wrong, which is not his fault. Yeah. And then in the next breath, saying that Ernest has done all of these things that we really don't see the proof of.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, at least he's consistent in the fact that we see no proof of either of these things. But it's a weird 180 to make. And then all of a sudden, he's Karate Elvis. Because he's like, oh, he's done a lot for me. And she's like, oh, really? What? And then he takes his wife and dips her and kisses her like that's something he learned from Ernest.
Yeah.
Which I'm like, maybe be, just throwing caution to the wind and doing something adventurous, sure. Yeah. But the idea that he learned to, be assertive and kiss his wife from Ernest doesn't make sense. But then for the rest of the time, every time he does something assertive, he's like, like does like an Ernest thing, and then occasionally like throws in like a karate stance, like, and I'm like, why are you suddenly Karate Elvis? It makes no sense.
The energy I honestly got off Dr. Mellon's performance the entire film is he felt like kind of a brand X of John Fiedler.
John Fiedler, yeah.
John Fiedler, the voice of Piglet. He just honestly, I totally get that. He does kind of have the same presence. Yeah. In fact, a similar look. He has more hair than John Fiedler ever had. But glasses, same kind of, demure kind of personality. Kind of demure, meek, just put upon.
Yeah. So he does kind of come off as a live action Piglet.
Yeah,
you're right. But yeah, so I have no problem with the character transitioning.
Yep.
But they didn't show any like build up to that. It was occasionally he would do something that he told Ernest a million times he didn't want to do, and then he did them. But those things never like coalesced and came together. It was just like all of a sudden, okay, yeah, no, this is the guy I am now.
No, like we were
Okay.
saying, he's the closest thing the movie has to a character with an arc and goals and ambitions, and it's still just kind of a mess.
But the
It's
arc is broken
yes, it
and
is
doesn't track.
in all ways. Yeah.
What it reads as is that there were and honestly, this can happen if if you don't have a good editor.
Mhm.
A writer will write a script and they'll write in things that like go from point A to point B, and then somehow either them editing or somebody else editing the transitions from one change of the character to the next get cut out. And sometimes the writer will make those not realizing what has been cut out, because nobody is then going back and reading the script and saying, oh, hey, you still have these different points, but you cut out the transition. This doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
That's what this reads as a little bit. But yeah, and that really is the journey of Dr. Abner Mellon. They do, find the crown jewels. And Ernest puts it on and for a short time is assumed to be the new king of England. But
I like
yeah.
that bit, and then it was over in like 10 seconds.
Yeah.
Honestly.
But yes, and then we also, I do want to go ahead then now and talk about Nan,
Yep.
played by Linda Cash.
Yep.
Because Linda Cash, I believe we're actually going to be seeing in a lot of the
He shows up,
the
I think,
upcoming.
like 2 more times, maybe 3. I don't know, something like that.
I know she's going to be the most recurring actor that we're going to see in these direct to DVD.
From here on out,
yeah.
By the way, but before I back off this IMDb page, you mentioned Ron James was in Ewoks. His character in Ewoks, I want to say this, Mring the Goopin.
Okay.
Yes.
Interesting.
I think he was in all episodes of that, by the way.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like I said, we're gonna see a lot of Linda Cash, and I will say Linda Cash, in everything I've seen her in, is a very over the top performer.
Yeah.
That's kind of just her style. At least, I mean, everything I've ever seen her in has been a comedy.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, she's an actor. I'm sure she has other gears.
Yeah.
But everything I've ever seen her in has been a comedy, and she's always an over the top performer, over the top character. One of the other things that I have seen her in outside of these Ernest films is she was in an episode of Monk where she was playing a psychic.
Okay.
But like a not a real psychic, not a good one. Yeah.
Yeah, twist in the Monk format. It's suddenly psychics are real. And
No, yeah. In fact, that's the whole thing, is that she somehow does stumble upon like a real case.
Yeah.
And Monk's like, yeah, no, something's fishy here, because she's not real. She's not legit. But yeah, so she is very over the top. And I will say that unfortunately in this, she plays kind of the stereotypical nagging wife.
Yeah.
Which is the thing about the character that I like the least.
Yeah.
Because, she is very much, pushes him around, spends all of his money, and then yells at him when he does things that embarrass her. All of that kind of, again, stereotypical nagging wife. And then at the end, when he asserts himself and kisses her, suddenly she's like, oh, my Uncle Burned in Love. And she bends to him now. And it's just like, okay, yeah, stereotype. I will say, for that type of character, I think Linda Cash plays it well. I just don't like that type of character.
Fair enough. Yeah, no, I again, the character is a kind of a nothing role here. It doesn't have any impact on the plot, really.
Yeah.
She's just sort of chasing it in a B plot that never comes to anything.
Well, and what's unfortunate is that there are some beats here where I can tell that Linda Cash, as a performer,
Yeah.
has some comic chops.
Yeah.
That she knows what's funny, what works, and
Yep.
how to make it funny.
Yep.
But I don't think she's always allowed to do it. And
Yep.
I don't know, again, if some of that stuff was lost in editing. But there are, and it's really, unfortunately, one of those things that you wouldn't pick up that she has that sense if you weren't a fellow performer.
Yeah.
If you couldn't see, oh, okay, she's playing this in a way that could be funny.
Mhm.
It's just somehow the way that it's coming off is not, it's not working well, or maybe, I mean, unfortunately, her biggest part of this film, and we haven't mentioned them yet, and we have to, are the
imitation
traveling
Cotton Pie.
salesman. Yes, that is what I wrote down. I was like, these guys are fulfilling the Chuck and Bobby role, and they're not Chuck and Bobby.
No.
In fact, but they are Frank and Joe, played by Duke Ensberger and Jeff Pillars, and they basically are traveling salesmen who are selling the Mighty Workboy Vacuum. And we constantly hear the Mighty Workboy jingle with, I'm the Mighty Workboy and I will work for you. And it's in this high pitch, you can tell it's been sped up.
Yeah.
And we constantly hear it, and it's really annoying. And here's the thing. I don't 100% hate these characters. I hate the way that they're used for the most part, because, again, most of their scenes are with
Nan.
Nan.
Yeah.
And these are the three characters in the film that I find the most annoying. So I don't think that they're a good pair. I mean, they are antagonistic with each other.
Yep.
So that's like some interesting conflict, but they're both equally antagonistic towards one another.
Mhm.
And I'm not rooting for either one of them in any scene specifically. Yep. And so, I mean, I will say the little bit that they do, because they're just salesmen, but for some reason they do this kind of dialogue read that you would typically only find between siblings and twins, where basically they finish each other's sentences. And again, I think the performers are doing this shtick well.
Yep.
I just find the shtick annoying. And I mean, there are, like, honestly, my favorite moment of theirs is at the end when they use the Mighty Workboy vacuum to vacuum over the bad guy to keep him from killing Ernest with an axe.
Yes, it is like that finally pays off in some
yes
way. Yeah.
And they're kind of like, like, oh crap, we brought the villain over here with an axe.
Yeah.
And they just try to like play it off like, you want to buy a vacuum? And it's like, that bit is funny.
Yeah.
Because finally they're working against someone where I'm rooting for them over this other guy.
Yeah.
We found a balance here with this chemistry. And what's unfortunate is that those three performers, Linda Cash and these other two, actually work well off of each other. But I don't like the characters that they're playing because they're all grating.
Yeah. They're all annoying, but at the same time, I do have to admit they're memorable. And at least engaging might not be exactly the right word, as opposed to the other secondary characters in this film, like the British guys that are chasing them around or whatnot. It's like, which are just total non-entities.
Which honestly, I was really hoping that they'd be more, because I love the image of the British agent who walks around with a lollipop.
Yes.
I just love that.
That is cute. Yes.
But that's like the one good thing that he gets.
That's the only character trait he has, is that he has a lollipop.
Yeah. It's tough.
But no, the British characters are non-entities. The the other professor, Ratcliffe or whatever his name was, is
Yeah,
just
okay.
evil.
We're going to talk about Glenncliffe in just a
Glenncliffe,
second. I
yeah.
do want to finish off with these guys
Sure,
though,
yeah. No, and
because
even when at some point in the film, I had to pause and back up, I forget, because I wasn't even clear the two of them got proper introductions, like, for names for both of them.
yeah, no, I'm just now realizing. Oh, their names were Frank and Joe.
Yeah. No, at some point, I don't know if I was, I did, because I didn't write their names down in my notes.
I will say it
But
is
no, midway
interesting
through, I
because
realized I had to, like, read their names off their badges at some point because, like,
oh wow, okay,
they did not one of them got named out loud, but the other one I don't think ever
yeah,
did.
yeah. I think Frank
Yeah, that sounds about
gets a
right.
shout out.
Yeah. As
But
opposed to, the really handy dandy, like, I'm chucking this in my brother Bobby. Like,
yeah,
I know who
well,
these characters are.
and like I said, they are filling the role that typically would have been filled by Chuck and Bobby,
Oh, yes.
but they are much more antagonistic than
Yeah.
Chuck and Bobby. And here's the thing: I think the pairing of Nan with the salesman would have worked better with Chuck and Bobby
I think you're right.
because they wouldn't have been that annoying grating.
Yeah.
But again, I don't know if them as those salesmen would have worked as well. I think we would have had to find, I mean, I don't know. I mean, Chuck could definitely do the salesman thing, but I don't think we could have done the same Mighty Workboy shtick. It would have had to been altered.
They
for
would have
Chuck
had,
and
they would have
Bobby.
obviously had a different delivery. They couldn't be bouncing off each other, finishing each other's,
No.
sandwiches the same way. And but Bobby would be the one demonstrating all the material. They would probably have more than just the vacuum. Bobby would
But-
be the demo man who
Yeah,
would be
but
showing all
you know, at some point there would have been a scene where Chuck is nattering along. Nan is sitting in the middle, and Bobby's just staring at her.
Yes.
And she's just like, will you stop that? I know that this could have worked
Yeah.
with those characters, and it would have been less annoying, less grating, and we would have gotten Chuck and Bobby.
Yeah.
Again, I don't think that any of the performers are bad on their face. They are actually putting in good performances without the being put together. But
Yeah.
those performances being put together don't work because they're all just annoying. We
Yeah.
need something. If you're going to give us an annoying character, we need someone that we like for them to work off
Yeah,
of.
so something different to bounce off of.
Yeah, if you give us two sets of characters that we don't like,
Yeah.
well, then we just aren't going to like seeing them together.
But they are, at least, like I said, they feel of a piece with what characters in an Ernest universe should feel like. That level of sort of heightened realism and comedy,
True.
as opposed to our other guys who feel like they were just pulled out of, like, I don't know, just random, like a direct video RoboCop sequel or something like that. Just some random, almost like Wall Street 80s direct to video productions. Like,
Yeah.
they're generic and uninteresting. I don't know their names. It's don't care who they are. They're just
Right.
people following Ernest.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I do now want to go ahead and talk about Dr. Radner Glenncliffe because he is the ostensible villain of the film.
Yep.
And number one, we don't get a whole lot from him. There's not a whole lot. He honestly just seems needlessly violent and villainous. And I'm like he goes real hard, and like we've had that before.
Yeah.
With in Ernest Goes to Camp.
Yeah.
Where the guy just went from, okay, you're being annoying to I'm gonna shoot you in the face.
Yeah.
And it's like, whoa, that's a jump, but it worked for that
Yeah.
film because of the other things around it. This, and don't get me wrong, Tom Butler as Dr. Glenncliffe does a good job coming off as menacing. I believe that he's willing to chop off Ernest's head.
Yeah.
But he goes from zero to bloodthirsty so quickly.
Yeah.
And I think what worked about it for John Vernon is that we didn't get the bloodthirsty beat till the end.
Yeah.
And so it was that much more impactful. Whereas the moment this guy turns into the villain, he is, oh, well, he's like, well, we'll cut him out of it. Because at one point, Ernest gets stuck inside the cannon.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, we'll cut him out. And Abner's like, well, you can't cut Goliath. It's a priceless relic. And he's like, who said anything about cutting Goliath?
Yeah.
I will say I did like that line because that felt like, a nice little villain line.
Yeah.
But then we're left with this kind of all of a sudden bloodthirsty villain through the whole rest of it. And it's just a little too much.
Yeah, we have a college professor who's out for, discovering an artifact who is just straight up homicidal starting midway through this film.
Right. And we never get I will say one of the biggest issues with this film is we never get clear intentions for anyone.
Yeah.
We never get a real intention for as to why Ernest was out there other than just adventuring.
Yeah.
We never get why this professor is, aside from, oh, they're gonna sell them back to England and get money, but if they discover blood on their artifacts, they're probably going to ask some questions.
Yeah.
So we probably need to be somewhat on the up and up. If you're just, playing the treasure hunter angle, there are more professional ways to go about this. So being that arch villain here doesn't really work. But there's also a scene where once Ernest, at a certain point, Ernest and Abner are kind of on the runaway cannon, which is where the Ernest Rides Again, title comes from. But at a certain point, the cannon stops and they attach it to a tractor and they start basically being able to will where the cannon is going. I will say there are a bunch of, physical gags with the cannon that are actually fun. They're a little nonsensical, but we get, cannons shot into cars. That's kind of fun. We get the bit with where the cannon runs into the RV. That's kind of fun.
I like the bit with the cliff and the spider.
Honestly, I love that bit.
Yeah.
That's honestly one of my favorite bits in the whole film.
Yeah.
But once they attach it to the tractor, they just start going off with the thing attached to the tractor. And I'm like, you're hidden in a barn. Nobody knows where you are. Where are you going? Where are you taking this cannon? They never give us a game plan. They're never like, well, these guys are after us, but if we can just get to the university, if we can just get to the police, if we can just, something. Yeah. If we can get to the British agents, they'll help. Something. But no, they have no plan. They just start driving this cannon out, and we're like, where are you going? Why are you out here now? There's no clear picture. There's no clear plan. And I feel like if we had been given a clear motive from the villain for why he is being this bloodthirsty with this situation. Yeah. I mean, I honestly can't think of a good motivation that justifies that type of violence.
Yeah, it occurs to me now, again, he's explicitly a college professor.
Yeah.
But he's a college professor who apparently has thugs. Am I right about this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, he does. In fact, did you notice this is the second instance where we see a villain in the background have a Confederate flag?
I didn't clock that.
In the tow truck.
Okay.
There is a Confederate flag in like I guess like in between the cab and the actual tow. I was curious though about the guy driving I will say those are some funny gags though with Abner, where Abner is just like, you wait till my wife finds out, and the guy just punches him. That is kind of a funny gag. But yeah, I was like, once again we have a Confederate flag, but once again it's in the place of a villain. So I'm like, I'm wondering if we're making a statement here about that. I mean, because at this point, people who have Confederate flags, oh, it's heritage. Are the makers of this film ahead of us there, or are they just like, oh, let's throw a Confederate flag in the background, not recognizing somehow that every time they've done it, it's been with a villain?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's an interesting question though to ask.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was a little confused. I was like, is this guy a tow truck driver, or is he a thug and somehow they got a tow truck that he's just driving?
I assumed the latter, to be honest. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that honestly, because he's there with them when he's not driving the tow truck.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm like, how did they get a tow truck?
All the other people made such a minimal impression on me. I did not track them through this film.
Sure. Honestly, if it weren't for the punch out gags, I wouldn't have noticed this guy at all either.
Yeah.
But and again, they do another sequence with a vehicle where the vehicle is still moving with no one driving it.
Yeah.
2 films in a row they do this gag.
Yeah. When they,
and again, the fight that ensues on it is actually fun.
Yeah.
But because I'm having a hard time suspending the disbelief, I'm just like, this makes no sense.
Okay. I took note of timestamps for this. This is the time.
Okay.
All right. So 45 minutes into this film is when the cannon starts getting towed from the site with Ernest in it.
Yeah.
So Ernest has gotten stuck in the cannon. Glencliff is towing it away somewhere. A couple minutes into this, finally Ernest manages to get out of the cannon. There's a whole exchange, and he ends up on top of the cannon. That's about 52 minutes in.
Yeah.
And then there's a long bit as we discussed where Ernest is riding the cannon. Hijinks ensue.
Yes.
About 1:11, cannon finally comes to a final stop in the barn. The cannon is in motion. From beginning to end of this sequence. And this isn't going from the barn. This is going from when Ernest is being towed with Ernest stuck in the barrel.
Right.
The cannon is in motion for 27 minutes of this film. Ernest is riding atop this cannon for 20 of those minutes. This is just an incredibly large chunk of this movie is just devoted to this cannon sequence. Almost a full third of it, to be honest.
Oh, I mean, the cannon bit is really the movie.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's not like there are multiple different bits. In some sense, it's broken up into different chunks of it. Because again, the first part, Ernest is stuck in it. Then he's on top of it for a while. Then Mellon's with him on the cannon for a while.
Right.
But no, the cannon, to the extent there's a cannon like chase sequence, it is between 20 and 27 minutes of this movie.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean it's interesting. I will say, one of my favorite bits of this film, and I was just like, it just seems kind of meta because they pointed something out about the character of Ernest. There is literally a line after they've discovered that what Ernest found at the construction site was the Goliath nameplate, and they're trying to go back to see if they can find more. I don't know why why Ernest didn't immediately say, well, this is where I found the nameplate, or why Abner didn't ask, well, where did you find the nameplate? Let's search there first.
Yeah.
They don't, but it's the exact same place. And then they find the cannonball. But again, he finds it the same way, where he falls down on a piece of the house, and then lands on something, hard and metal. And Abner straight up asks him, he's like, Ernest, are you dead? He goes, well, I probably should be, but considering the fact that I'm practically a live action cartoon, and I'm just like, oh my God, they actually pointed out the cartoonishness of Ernest. I'm just like, I don't know if that's good or bad, but I kind of like the fact that they've just straight out admit it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just like, wow. Okay. Yeah. Just straight up
See it,
acknowledge the
but
fact that, yeah, just a live action car. Because, there are several points. At one point, he gets shot in the head by a nail gun.
yeah, I made a note of that too. Yeah.
And they pull off the hat, and all the nails are bent
Yeah.
against his head. And he constantly calls his head the hard end.
Yeah.
Breaks a bone saw on his head.
Yes.
You know.
One of the other things I noted there was that is one of the few times I think Ernest takes his hat off as Ernest. Yeah.
We actually see
Hair.
several moments of Ernest without his hat in this film. Whereas in the other films, I don't know that there's even a second of Ernest without his hat in most of the others.
I mean, not when he's at least playing Ernest, really. I feel
Right.
like there might be a moment or two, clearly like
Yeah, I mean, obviously in Ernest Goes to Jail when he's Nash.
Yeah.
But when he's Ernest, hat's constantly on, to the point where Nash puts on a hat before he switches with Ernest so that there won't be a moment.
And in particular, what comes to my mind is in one of the few times we'll need to acknowledge this, hey, Vern, it's Ernest. The barbershop bit is specifically staged every time to not let you see what Ernest's hat.
Yeah, he covers himself off and then wrenches the hat off.
The barber steps in the way and squeaks the hat off his head. A second ago when I was saying how long the cannon bit ran, I suddenly realized, like, as I look at my timestamp, there's like 25 minutes of film after the cannon stops.
Yeah.
I had to go back and just like scroll through YouTube just a second ago to like figure out what happens in those 20 minutes. It's like the cannon stops. Very little plot happens in the last 20 minutes of this film.
Right.
But it just keeps going. There's What you were saying earlier about the Ernest,
because there's very
not a
little
lot of
plot
movie
in
here.
the film.
No.
Period. I will say something that I just noticed. Daniel Butler is not in this film.
Yeah.
He had been in a lot of the previous ones.
Yeah.
But the villain is played by Tom Butler. I
Yeah.
don't think they're related because he's a
Probably.
Canadian actor.
Yeah.
But it is funny. Well, we can't get Daniel, so we'll get Tom instead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll say too, by the way, at the very end, when we did get those 10 seconds of where they announced that, because he's wearing the crown, Ernest is now the legal king of England. That honestly sounds like a funnier premise for a movie than Ernest.
Honestly, I would have loved to. I would have loved that to be like a sequence in the credits.
Yeah,
that would have been
funny too.
Fun, yeah. We don't need a lot of it because I wouldn't need a whole film. A short, sure.
Yeah, this was 2 years after King Ralph, so yeah, we do not need another film of a bumpkin being king of England.
Yeah, because if I remember, I haven't seen King Ralph, but I've also never heard many people say a lot of great things about it.
I have not heard anyone other than me speak it out loud in probably 20 years.
Yeah, exactly. It
is not high on John Goodman's oeuvre.
Yeah, John Goodman's film career was a little bumpy to start off with.
A little bit until he found the Coens. When he found the Coen brothers.
Once he found the Coen brothers, he was off to the races. But I mean, he did The Babe after this. And I've seen that movie and I don't remember it being great.
Yes. To be clear for any listeners, that is The Babe,
not Babe. No, he's not playing the pig.
Yes.
No, he's playing Babe Ruth.
Yes.
I mean, decent casting.
Yeah, no,
but I mean, I haven't seen the film in a while, so I
had not thought of that film probably since it came out.
Most people haven't.
No, they haven't. That's the sort of film, like, if I do the box office game online and like suddenly the answer is the Babe, it's like, oh, that's right. That is a film that existed. I do remember that now. Yeah.
Yeah. I only saw it because honestly, even when I think about it now, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But we were going to be going to my grandparents' summer home in Ohio, and the little town that they lived in basically had like a one-screen movie theater. And my mother looked up what the film was going to be while we were there, and it was the Babe Ruth story with John Goodman. And For some reason, she decided, oh, okay, so we need to watch it now, so that you guys will be ready to watch it when we go. I will say, when we got there, that was not the film playing. And I was like, and I remember asking my mother about it, and she was like, oh, I think we just got it wrong. I mean, I think what was playing instead was Homeward Bound, which I had already seen that too. But I'm like, why did we need to pre-watch a movie to go watch a movie?
Yeah.
I think really what it was is my mom just wanted to make sure that it was open, because when I was there, we were pretty much unsupervised. We just ran around with our cousins and did stuff. So I think she just wanted to make sure, okay, if they're just going to run around and go watch this movie, we want to watch it with them first.
Yeah.
But getting back to the movie, we constantly keep talking about other things because there's not a whole lot in the film. I will say, though, there are a couple of bits that I do want to mention. Number one, there is a bit with when we are first finding out, well, actually the very first scene that we meet Abner Mellon, where basically he is being he's in trouble with the board at the university for his theories. And what I gather from it is that he is teaching his unproven theories in class. And I just and the way that it's framed, we're made to feel like oh, this poor guy, he's nobody believes him, and people need to believe him, and all this kind of stuff. We're meant, I feel like in that scene, we're meant to be rooting for Abner, but I wrote down, I'm kind of with them. He should not be teaching his unsubstantiated claims in class.
That might be my least favorite scene in the entire film. Not specifically for that reason, though. It's like, this is a heightened Ernest reality film. If he wants to teach a crazy theory, this is also back in the day. It's early 90s. It's pre X-Files. It's like we were a little more tolerant of like, that noble person who's pressing something that's out on the edge of what people are willing to accept. But the scene, for one thing, is laid out. It's not laid out like a comedy. It feels like it's just been ripped from some, again, bad 80s drama about like higher education or something. It's in any sense. And it's not very clear what the stakes are. Like you said, you get the impression it's because
there never are. Because they never like are telling him, you do this again, your job's on the line or anything like that. It's more just like, don't teach this in class. And I'm like, I agree.
No, you
don't teach it in class.
If that's the point of the scene. You simply skip the scene where they're reading their judgment, and they're in the course of that, somewhat narratively explaining what the offense was and what it is he needs to stop doing. It's a mess of a scene. That, in my opinion, after the opening comedic cartoonish bit with the nail gun and all, just brings the momentum to an absolute halt. And then it has to recover from that. And an Ernest movie does not need that kind of scene in like the opening 15 minutes.
Here's the thing. I don't think it was a bad scene. I don't know. I kind of get what you're saying, though. I don't know that it belonged there. I think that we could have just gotten it didn't need to be like a whole, tribunal. It was just like maybe the dean of the college,
You're right.
They set up weird
with him. He was the dean, him as his supervisor. He's probably an associate professor on some sense.
And just being like, Abner, your theories are interesting. But you shouldn't be teaching them in class. And if he is going to be coming down on him for then it needs, I don't know. It just the stakes feel weird.
Well, it needs to explain up. Let me say this too, because this ties in with one of my other complaints from later in the film, which is it would be very helpful if the movie explained in that scene what Abner's theory is, because the scene definitely doesn't do that at all.
No, we kind of pick that up along the way.
we kind of pick it up along the way. And
Yeah.
when it finally is explained, I missed it the first time round because it's explained in a scene where Ernest is like making a sandwich out of
Steel wool. Yeah.
steel wool. Yeah. So
Well,
I'm paying
what's
attention.
unfortunate is it feels like that scene was set up specifically to explain his theory.
Yes.
And
But
for some reason, then they didn't.
yeah, and so as the steel wool bit is going on, and
Mhm.
sometimes the camera is just on Jim Varney doing the steel wool bit, I was paying attention to that, not to the narration that Fiedler's giving, not Fiedler, that
Right.
Mellon is giving in the background.
Again, Jim Varney doing a Mr. Bean-esque.
Yes,
I
yes,
mean,
yeah,
I hate continually because Mr. Bean is not
Yeah.
the only one who's ever done that type of
Yeah.
shtick. But for anyone who maybe isn't familiar with some of the bits that Ernest would do, they are comparable to the
Yeah.
type of thing that Mr. Bean would do. Basically, he's making himself a sandwich. And I will say, Ernest, especially in the beginning of this film, is obsessed with sandwiches
Yes.
because every time we see him like not actively doing something, he's eating a sandwich or making a sandwich or something like that. But yes, he is making a sandwich, accidentally put steel wool in the sandwich.
Yeah.
And I will say, I was looking around on that table and I'm like, what did he think he was putting on that sandwich besides steel wool? Because
Yeah.
I didn't see any meat or cheese or anything else.
Yeah.
For him to put on that sandwich.
Yep.
So it almost feels like he wanted to make a steel wool sandwich. And then he drinks acid.
Yeah.
And then he spends a good amount of the scene trying to figure out what to do with this mouthful of acid.
and I was so focused on that because the film was focused on that. I missed.
Well, it's also kind of a
Mellon-
funny bit.
No, it's a funny bit. but
The way
because-
that Varney is doing it is it's great
The-
visual humor.
it's again one of the better Ernest bits in the movie, but it's dominating the scene, and because they decided to deliver all of Mellon's
The exposition, yeah.
under that,
Yeah.
I missed it all. Like
Sure.
I'm not saying, to be very, very clear about this, I'm not saying take away Ernest eating the steel wool sandwich. I'm saying
No.
you take all the exposition about what is Mellon's theory and you stick it in the first scene.
Yes, because without that scene does seem superfluous.
It does.
Because all it does is set up that they're mad at him
Yeah.
for this theory.
Which they aren't
And-
doing for the rest of the film. That's not an issue. Like
Well, yeah, the
he has
college
some-
thing doesn't get brought up.
Yeah.
And they also do the thing of setting up the book, which Ernest then later destroys, but we never see the payoff of the destruction of the
No.
book either.
no.
Um,
In fact,
but
now that occurs to me,
That scene also does set up the introduction of the villain.
I was going to say what
So
that
it
thing
is
being said, like we were
necessary,
talking about
but
it being
we
a
could have done
supervisor,
more with it.
about instead of having it be a board, having it be like a dean or a professor above him. It
It
should have
could have
just been a
just been that
meeting
guy.
between him and Glenncliffe.
Yeah.
And Glenncliffe is in the course of the scene explaining like you're teaching these wackadoo theories about the crown jewels. That's not what this college stands for. It's happening incidentally in Glenncliffe's office, so we get that setting established.
Well,
already.
honestly, here's what I'm thinking, and I'm rewriting this on the fly.
Yeah.
We see the scene of Abner coming out of the dean's office, having just been reamed.
Yep.
We just get the clear idea, and then we see Glenncliffe coming up after Abner, and he's like, "Oh, Abner, oh, bad meeting with the dean, yeah, and then we explain the theory, and he's like, actually, we get all of that in a hallway scene.
Yeah.
We don't
Subsequently.
need a whole lot. We didn't need the book gag
No.
because it doesn't pay off.
No.
Aside from the payoff of getting to see it destroyed, they use that scene to show us that this is a priceless thing and be careful with it. And then the next time we see it, Ernest uses it to block his big metal boomerang, which then utterly destroys the book.
Yeah.
But we then don't get to see a payoff of the destruction of the book.
Yeah.
So I mean that could have been melted down into a quick little scene where we establish the villain, we establish his interest in the theory, and we get to hear what the theory is. Because those are the three most important things to establish in this time. And instead, like you said, it gets buried in a scene where, yes, of course, Ernest is on the scene. Of course, we're going to be paying attention to whatever shenanigans he's doing.
And because I was paying attention to him, I got and the reason I had to back it up, look for it eventually, was like, and I think look to Wikipedia. It's like I'm not clear why they're looking for the crown jewels in the canon. Like that, I feel like I'm midway through this film, and that hasn't been explained to me. Like,
Sure.
and then I had to back up and figure out, like, where in the film did they explain this? Oh no, there, when comic hijinks were happening, and I was paying attention to the comedy in the comedy movie.
Yeah. I will say I want to throw this in just because I'm not sure where else we're going to talk about it.
Yeah.
There is a bit because eventually at one point Nan buys a car that Abner doesn't think that they can afford, and I guess she must have traded in their old car to get the new as a means to get the new car, because it doesn't seem like they have a second car, in which case I'm like, well, how was he getting to and from work beforehand? Because later on when he goes to work, he takes her new car, and then when she comes out and doesn't see the car, she's surprised because she's like, no, it's not our car, it's my car. And I'm like, do you only have one car? Because she then gets the Mighty Workboy guys to drive her around to try to get the car
They have a
back.
good public transit system in this town in Tennessee.
But then again, if that's what he's been using, why doesn't she use that? If that's the again, it just doesn't track.
Yeah.
But so he has the car, and he's very particular. He's like, oh, Nan doesn't want anything to happen to the car, and then of course, because we know nothing's supposed to happen to the car has to be utterly destroyed.
Yeah.
So when they do eventually find Goliath, Ernest loses it, and the very first time that it is brought out, it immediately runs into Nan's car and destroys it.
Yes.
And the best bit about that is that we see this car explosion. We see the look of horror on Abner's face, and Ernest just goes, neat. And just his reaction there was, I literally laughed out loud.
Yeah.
Because it was just, it was 100% a child reaction, a childish reaction. He's not thinking of, oh, this is my friend Abner's car, this is his wife's car, he's in so much trouble. He's just thinking, explosion, neat. But also the choice of the word neat instead of anything else.
Yeah,
was
some
also,
other adjective. Yeah.
Yeah.
I also, in the moment, appreciated the fact that this film did not have the budget to show the cannon hitting the car. They had a budget to have a wrecked car, but not to have a special effect.
Well, they showed it going in, and then there was like, it wasn't your typical explosion though. It was more like dirt, like a dirt bomb went off. I remember thinking that was weird. Did the car explode in a cloud of dirt? I have expected to come upon the car and it's just caked in mud instead of utterly just. I mean, obviously they then got a demolished.
Yeah, then they got
car.
demolished car right there. Yeah,
but yeah, I'm just like, that was an odd looking explosion.
Yeah, again, cause I guess they wanted the visual of an explosion as opposed to just having the sound of a cannon running into a car.
Yeah,
because again, they can't show it.
Yeah. I will say there was one funny bit with the professor when Ernest is trying to get him to jump from the moving truck that no one is driving to the cannon, and he's like jump, and he just jumps up, and it's like the tiniest little jump. I was like, okay, that's funny. I think it's probably like one of the funniest beats that he gets.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like the Karate Elvis thing was supposed to be fun, but it was so out of nowhere that I had a hard time laughing about it, because I was just like, it's just so off the wall. Like, where did that come from?
Yeah. But I had a note here that in terms of again, the film not having the budget to do everything it wants.
Yeah.
When the cannon is, I think, running across a field towards a picnic or something like this. It's clearly been, off road for a while now. There are a couple of very clear shots that show that there are fences that are still erected behind him. That, like, he's clearly coming from that direction. Like they could have shot around that, but they didn't. It's by the way, when they finally kind of does come to a stop, when they're in the barn, it's him and Melon.
Mhm.
I wrote down I only wrote down like 3 lines from this entire film. One was you guys will be in trouble when my wife finds out.
Yeah.
Which was funny. I
Yep.
wrote down England will have a new king. I think because that was a plot development midway through this film. It's like, oh, so we're after the crown jewels because whoever gets the jewels is the actual king of England.
Mhm.
That hasn't been set up as stakes up till now. It never matters again, really, except for 10 seconds when Ernest puts it on for the sake of a gag. But
yeah,
you'd think that might be the professor's. Someone in this film could have the agenda of they want the jewels because they want to be the king of England, or at least is under the impression.
Right. Yeah. Honestly, ultimately, that's what I came to must be Glenncliffe's plan.
Yeah, but he never says it. That's the
But
problem.
he never says it
No.
because they specifically want the crown.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I feel like he could have had this, I will be the king of England and I will reunite the UK with the States and, you know, some big, you know, he's already this over the top villain. Let's give him an over the top plan. But instead, he doesn't have a plan. He doesn't have a real motivation other than just vague greed.
Yeah, exactly. The impression is that he wants it for, I don't know, the prestige, or maybe, I don't know. He can't sell it.
No.
So
No.
It-
So
yeah,
yeah, I mean that
his why he is homicidal over this, his stakes are really unclear.
I mean, I guess they kind of set it up with the fact that he has collected all of these priceless artifacts and he has
Which is
said that
nice.
he spent several fortunes collecting them. So I'm like, okay, from that angle, sure. But also, you used your pre-internet research,
Yep.
which you knew would tip off the British government. So you've already got them sniffing around.
Yep.
So you're not going to have the crown jewels for very long.
Yep.
So what really is your game plan here if it's not to become the new king of England?
I got the feeling
That
someone
I
could
think
just
is the only thing that
claim-
makes sense.
someone could almost just claim the crown jewels by, like, you know, basically adverse possession here, but, like, again, no one says it out loud.
No.
Someone needs to state that, like,
Well, and that
whoever
doesn't
has the
seem to
jewels now
be
owns the jewels.
right, but that doesn't seem to be the fear of the British government. They're afraid somebody's going to put on the crown.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Third quote I wrote down from this movie
Yeah.
is in the barn after the cannon stops and
Mm-hmm.
Ernest and Melon are sitting there chatting and eating corn randomly.
Yeah.
One of them, I think it's Ernest, who says, "We're adventurers, aren't we?" Like, and he names 3 pairs of people who he identifies as adventurers. You know where I'm going here?
I can't remember the names, but
He
I
says,
remember thinking some of those are some odd choices.
Yeah, they're all odd choices, honestly.
Okay,
But
okay.
we're adventurers, aren't we? Like, one, Bonnie and Clyde. Third, I'm going to skip number 2 for a second. Third, Wilbur and Mr. Ed.
Yes. Oh,
Second,
I do remember the second
you
one.
remember where this is going now.
Yes.
In
Oh,
between
God.
the adventurers, in between Bonnie and Clyde and Wilbur and Mr. Ed are Donald and Ivana. It's aged so well.
Mm-hmm. Wait, wasn't it Ivanka? Isn't
It
that
is,
his wife?
it is
Isn't
Ivana. Ivanka is his daughter.
oh,
Ivanka
okay. I guess I can't keep them straight then.
Yeah, she
Okay.
Ivanka would have been about 10 years old at this time.
Okay, yeah. For some reason, I was thinking Ivanka was the name of his wife.
No,
But
Ivana.
okay, all right. Yeah. So, yeah. No, when I heard that one, I was like, "That's weird."
Yeah. Again, it's the kind of reference that played very differently back in the 90s.
Yeah.
In the same way that, like, in the Heights, originally in 96,000 makes a reference to, like, having Donald Trump as your caddy, and for the movie they had to change that. It's like Tiger
Yeah.
Woods as my caddy. Yeah.
Yeah. I will say at this point, I'm basically just reading through my notes of things that I thought were fun because there's not a whole lot of other plot.
There's, like I said,
to
the
talk
the
about.
last 20 minutes of this movie are kind of ephemeral. Like the cannon stops.
What,
Stuff
what
happens.
once Ernest finds the crown, puts it on his head, and then they discover that it's stuck and he can't get it off. Yeah, it's basically just a series of gags.
Yeah.
From then on, some of which are more successful than others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Abner has a bit with his wife. He argues with Ernest about stuff for a bit. He and his wife reconcile.
Yeah.
There's a fight with the bad guys as they're trying to kill Ernest. Like you
Yeah.
mentioned the vacuum scene from earlier.
Yeah.
I did enjoy, as weird as it was for Glencliff to be just straight up villainously homicidal.
Yeah.
I did enjoy the use of antique weapons in his office. So like when he pulls out an elephant gun,
I liked that, with the exception of the fact that we have set up that this is a priceless collection for him, and
Yes.
that he values it above anything else, and he is utterly destroying it.
Oh, see, that's fine for me. That's fine for me.
For,
I enjoyed the
again,
antiques
an
because
unmotivated purpose
it's-
of going after the
the
jewels.
thing is, I would contend it's not unmotivated. We know a couple things about Glencliff. One is that he values all these antiques. The other is that he is obsessed with getting these jewels, and in the moment, he has become so obsessed he's throwing everything else to the wind and is screwing up all his own stuff.
But then moments after that, once he puts down the gun, something almost falls, and he's like, "Oh," like super protective again. And I'm just like,
I mean, but that's a problem with that scene. That's probably that
Sure.
beat. Not a problem with him blowing. Because honestly, again, for the sake of the comedy in this film, him taking an elephant gun and blowing up mummies and sarcophaguses and stuff in
Yeah.
his office is good.
yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
But
You
yeah,
set all that up earlier in the film. Like he wants more stuff, and at the end of the film, he is left with nothing. That's the way these kind of villain arcs need to go. He needs to be left as less of a person at the end of this.
I feel like I would have felt like it made more sense if we understood why he wants the crown so much.
Oh no,
If-
again, I agree on that.
If
too. Yes,
if
me too.
they had said that he wants it so that he can be the king of England,
Yeah.
well then yeah, the rest of this stuff doesn't matter so
Exactly.
much,
That-
because
that's
that will
how you
bring with it some power.
That's
we
how you
won't have
improve that. That's how
otherwise.
you make it all fuller.
But
Absolutely.
because we don't have that, it doesn't make sense why he's willing to destroy all of these things. That's why I said it was unmotivated.
Oh, yeah.
Because we don't know the actual motivation.
I'm fine
We
with it
can
still.
guess,
We can guess.
but it would have been better if we didn't have to guess, and
Yeah.
he said it, and it was
Mhm.
part of his plan.
I'm fine with it being obsession because already up till this point, he is a tenured college professor who is willing to commit premeditated murder
Yep.
for this.
Yep. Sure.
In front of a colleague, and confess it. He's clearly out of his gourd over this.
Oh, 100%.
So yeah.
But yeah, I think the only other note that I have, I have two scenes. There's the Auntie Nelda scene, which is great. I mean, it's really short.
Yeah.
But it's funny really for just one bit where, he's being chased by one of Glencliff's goons, and he finds a laundry line and grabs the thing and disguises himself as Auntie Nelda, and the guy runs in and he's like, "Hey lady, you see a guy run through here?" and Auntie Nelda is basically just like, "You remind me of my son Jaime. I needed to teach him some manners. He's dead now." I just like that whole bit was, and I think there's just a little bit, but yeah, I thought that bit was funny.
Yeah.
He needed to learn some manners.
Mhm.
He's dead now, but then the other bit is, I think we've already briefly mentioned it before, was one of the better scenes in the film, was the scene where the cannon is teetering on the cliff.
Mhm.
And we're getting this tension of, Ernest trying to figure out a way for them to safely dismount the cannon. And it's the scooch hop
Yeah.
bit that was fun because we get, not just some physical comedy, but also some verbal
Some
comedy.
verbal comedy.
And he's like,
The screams over like the definition of scooch versus hop. Yes.
Right. And he's like, I need you to scooch towards me. And he goes a little, he's like, that was a scooch, that was a hop. And he was like, what? And he's like, yeah, you were looking, I told you not to look. He was like,
Yeah.
you looked and you scooched, and that constitutes as a hop.
Yeah,
He's
it feels like the kind of
Yeah.
exchange you'd have with like in Seinfeld or like with Joey and Friends or something like that.
Yeah. It's very much
kind of-
that kind of comedic interplay. So yeah, I thought that, and then yes, ultimately Ernest sees the tarantula behind him, and then it ends up just plummeting down. But no, I thought that was honestly a highlight of the film, was that scene. But is there anything else particularly about the film that we wanted to say before we get into the rest of it?
I got one thing I'm saving for the questions at the end, but I do have one other thing, which is, and
Yes.
it comes at the very end of the film, which is the very last thing in this film is a teaser for Slam Dunk Ernest.
Okay, I didn't get the Slam Dunk Ernest. I got the teaser for Ernest Goes to School.
I'm sorry, it's Ernest Goes to School. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay,
I didn't write down the movie. I just wrote down the line I wanted to quote here. So yes,
Sure.
it was a teaser for Ernest Goes to School, which ends with coming August '94 at theaters everywhere. And nope, they really should not have teased that.
No. I mean, obviously that was. This was the first time that they did kind of like the James Bond thing of announcing their next movie at the end of the film.
Yep, not good.
So obviously they'd already started production on Ernest Goes to School by the time this came out, but it was before they realized that it was not successful enough for it to stay in theaters, or really for any of the other films to go to
No, it's like any of those young adult properties that like advertise like, come back to see the next installment of the Sorcerer's Apprentice or something like that. And a second one never gets made. It's
right.
Cirque du Freak or something like that. It's like, there was one.
Yeah.
Clearly you wanted to make more. But...
Yeah, no, the thing that stuck out to me about that was, and he's done it in several of the other films or bits. He does the nails on the chalkboard.
Yeah, I never loved that.
And it is excruciatingly long. Like I'm one of those people, I can't deal with that sound. It is grating. It makes every part of me just kind of, but he does it for at least 10 to 15 seconds continuously.
Yeah.
And I'm like, are you trying to get people to not want to see this movie? Because now that's my biggest fear, is that when I watch this movie next time for the podcast, I'm going to have to deal with a bunch of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just like, oh God, no. Oh,
yeah.
But yeah.
So we can move on to the end now. I got nothing else.
All right. Well then, yes, let's go ahead and let us move now into our segments. And we will start with, of course, our moment. This is, of course, the moment in the scene that either was our favorite or was the most interesting. So, Loren, what was your moment?
So, my favorite moment in the scene in the film is not technically a scene, but and this is what I was holding off for a minute ago. We did not discuss it, but we did preview it earlier, which is the Man Named Worrell song that runs over the opening credits.
It is the best. I mean, for anybody that listens to the podcast, it is the song that I use for the theme of this show. Because how this was never written before, that they waited for this film, like it's the perfect Ernest theme.
Yeah,
it's just it's great. I mean, you can find the whole thing with the visual on YouTube if you don't want to just straight up watch the movie. But yeah, that theme is, yeah, I mean, I have a hard time arguing with you that it's not one of, if the best scene in the, it is inarguably the best intro to any Ernest film, in my opinion.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and
Well, and there's also an animated sequence of like old like photos or paintings
Mhm.
with Ernest's face superimposed.
photoshopped in there kind of thing.
Yeah, it's great.
It is cute. Yes. Yeah, I forgot that's what they have running under
Yeah.
that. But yes, those are nice. Those work. And granted, the song doesn't like work on multiple levels the way like "Gee, I'm Glad It's Raining" does.
No.
But no, it's solid. It's a good intro to the film. It deserves a better film to be the intro to.
Sure.
Honestly. But no, easily it was the best part, and unfortunately, that meant the entire film was just kind of on a downward trajectory from the opening credits, because that's at a high bar.
Sure. For me, I'm gonna, I had a few possibilities, but here's the thing: they're all Ernest scenes. We've
Yep.
mentioned it before. That is, without a doubt, the strength of the film is anything having to do with Ernest gags, Ernest bits. If it didn't have Ernest in it, it could have been okay, but it wasn't going to be one of the best parts of the film. So for me, it was the reaction to the car explosion. Neat.
Yep.
Or the Auntie Nelda scene, because I did enjoy that Jaime joke. Or the scooch hop scene on the cannon. And I think ultimately I'm going to give it to scooch hop.
Yeah.
Because like you said, it's not just visual. There's also, a verbal gag going on. I like the fact that it's one of the few scenes that is both of them being funny.
Yes.
And it's not just Ernest. Finally we found something that works for Abner.
Yes.
Because honestly, there were points at which I liked Abner, but then there were large other points where I'm like, he's just nothing.
Yeah.
So that then brings us to, I would arguably say, the hardest part of this, which is the Auntie Nelda Award. This is, of course, the award that we give to our favorite or most interesting character in the film. And I mean, I've never said that this has to be your rule, but it is specifically my rule. I can't pick Ernest, and Ernest was without a doubt the best part of this film. So I'm curious as to where you landed.
Well, I always took your instruction there to just mean that we're limiting the award to non-Ernest characters.
Right. Because I mean, I think even in the ones before it almost
Jim Varney.
Right, because even in the ones before it, even in the stronger films, 9 times out of 10, it was probably going to be Ernest if we hadn't excluded him.
I mean, like in camp, it's still Ernest. Like there's no one else.
Yeah, I mean, there are other characters that we like in that. I think I gave it to John Vernon in that because I did really enjoy his villain.
Yeah.
In that. But yes, when you all utterly bring it down, yes, of course, the best character in the whole thing is Ernest. It is an Earnest film. But we're getting into the films where it's going to be harder and harder.
Yes.
To find.
But secondary. I mean, so long as the parameters here are, what is my favorite non-Ernest performance in the film? Who is my favorite non-Ernest actor in the film? I identified that relatively quickly in this film.
Okay.
Honestly, because my answer is Linda Cash as Nan.
Okay. Because again, we mentioned it. Not giving a bad performance.
No, exactly. Again,
not necessarily being utilized correctly, but not giving a bad performance at all.
Nan is not a greatly written character in this film. She is largely superfluous, stuck in a thankless subplot. She there are other ways you could have done this to introduce more of a conflict between her and Abner. Any other things you could have done to Not make her more well-rounded. That's not necessary, but just give her more to do than just chase after for them for the rest.
Sure.
But
Sure.
the performance that Linda Cash is giving is perfectly solid. She clearly has comedic chops. She's bringing more to the role than they've given her on the page.
Yeah.
And she actually makes an impact that, at least for me, isn't like as annoying as the brothers. They're not even brothers, the salesmen.
Yeah, they come off as brothers though.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
kind of come off as brothers, but
Yeah. Because it should have
um,
been Chuck and Bobby.
it should have been Chuck and Bobby. Yeah,
Yeah.
she at least feels like a character who could be in this film in a better role, and she's giving a solid performance with what she's been asked to do,
Sure.
above and beyond what she's been asked to do in this film. So yeah,
Right.
Linda Cash easily.
Okay. I will say, and honestly, we might need to do that. We might just need to say that we're giving to the awards to the actor,
Yep.
not necessarily to the character, because I think a lot of the characters are going to be badly written going forward.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that the performers are doing a bad job.
No.
It's just that they weren't given a whole lot to work with. I will say, a part of me, in my memory, I probably would have given this to Abner. Just because I do think that in moments he is a good straight man to Ernest.
Yeah.
But then there are huge bits where it's just nothing. And his character is nothing. And it's really hard, to say, well, that's my Neldy Award. And then there's also, I also thought about Linda Cash. I also have considered the Mighty Workboy guys, because yes, they are annoying, but they are playing those annoying characters very well.
Yeah.
To a T.
Yeah.
In fact, and I just thought about this as you were talking, because I think the biggest problem is that for the majority of the film, they are working off of Nan, who is also a very annoying, abrasive character. And had they been working off of a character that had it not been two abrasive, annoying characters working off of each other, I think we could have enjoyed those scenes more. I think they made a mistake by not making their main antagonist Abner.
Yeah, I was about to say the same thing. That could have worked.
If we had that kind of meek, mild-mannered, and maybe he's the one that they encounter first, and he's just like, "Oh, guys, I'll have to ask my wife. Oh, I'm not really sure, And basically they are chasing Ernest and Abner to try to get him to buy the Mighty Workboy vacuum. That would have made more sense.
I mean, for a long stretch of the film there, again, like I said, 20 minutes, Ernest is riding on top of this cannon for a long stretch. If Abner had needed to get a ride, and he gets it with them instead of Nan.
Right. Because then we could have got that kind of, that's how we get them into it. And then eventually they go after the crown jewels. But yeah, I think putting those Nan and the Mighty Workboy guys together, those characters don't work. I think those performers are all doing great work.
Yeah.
There. It's just their characters are not the right tone to mesh together.
Yeah.
I'm sure that those performers seem to have actually pretty good chemistry together. All three of them.
They're doing fine. They're doing well,
but those characters just don't mesh. And then I also did think about Dr. Glencliff, because he does give me that kind of menacing, villain, but he goes from zero to bloodthirsty so quick. We never get any motivation. Again, that's not the actor's fault, but it does really hurt the performance. So I think, and I had thought about it, and you almost talked me out of it. And as I was talking about it, I talked myself back into it. I'm giving it to the Mighty Workboy guys. Because again, I don't think that those characters meshed well together.
Yeah.
But when I have to just put together who I think actually gave the best, and again, most interesting performance, you can't argue that Linda Cash as Nan and the Mighty Workboy guys aren't at the top of that list.
Yeah.
They
They're
are
memorable and they make an impact in this
they're
film.
working super hard in this film. Not
They
to
are.
say that other actors aren't,
Yeah.
but they're obviously limited by what they're given. And these guys I can see beyond their limitations, and I can tell that even though I don't necessarily like what's being done, I can tell that they're doing good work.
Yeah, and like I said before, they're a little more dialed into what the comedy of this film is supposed to be.
Yeah,
and so that plays well.
Well, and they obviously work off well against each other.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, so yeah, I'm giving it to Frank and Joe, Duke Ensberger, and Jeff Pillars.
It does say something about the overall quality of this film that you're giving this award to the dollar store Chuck and Bobby that are at the center of it. Yeah,
especially because I was only able to give it to Chuck and Bobby once.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, they are the performers that we named outside of Jim Varney.
Yeah,
they're the ones that they showed their work. We saw how they got there, and I actually admire them as performers. I don't envy what they've been tasked to do.
Yeah.
But I do admire them as performers. I think that they actually put in good work for what they were given.
No, they understood the assignment, as they say.
Exactly. All right. So now it is time to go ahead and ask the big question, the most important question, the question so important that Jim Varney himself, Ernest, never stopped asking. So, Loren, I will pose to you. When it comes to Ernest Rides Again, do you or do you not know what he means, Vern?
For, I think, all the previous films, like, I knew what he meant. I think I said at the end of Ernest Scared Stupid when we reached this point in the podcast that I was afraid that was going to be the last time I would get to say that.
Sure.
And it's looking that way. Unless we have a severe upturn here with like Slam Dunk Ernest or something. No, not only is this not a good film, it's hard to see how to easily fix it. Like you have to do.
I mean, we definitely came up with fixes for certain things, but there are so many problems.
We came up with fixes for them. I think this film could be fixed, but it would basically just have to be like, you just have to go back to the drawing board and like rewrite most of this film.
Yeah.
Like, from the ground up. Like, I'm legitimately not sure what the central idea in this film is. Like, is this a film about the crown jewels, or is it a film about like a cannon chase? It's like,
I think it's ultimately about Ernest and Abner's friendship is what it's supposed to be about,
which is really not clear in the final product. Yeah. No, whatever was the germ, again, for all the other Ernest films, you at least have a sense of what is the germ of an idea that grew into this film. You know, Ernest is a camp counselor, Ernest and Santa, Ernest, ending up in jail. All the other ones subsequently from now, like, straight up put it in the title. It's Ernest goes to school, and Ernest goes to Africa, and Ernest joins the army, and Ernest plays basketball. Sure. In this one, like, it's a big hour and a half of nothing. It's a really unfocused film. And I wish I knew what he meant, but I don't.
Sure. I will say I agree with a lot of your points. I really can't disagree with anything that you said. But I'm a little bit more torn. Partially because I did grow up with this film, so I still have some and my overall memories from this film were having fun with it.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I still had fun with this film. Now, were there more things than more annoying, that doesn't make sense, things than I remembered? Yeah, of course, because I'm older, I'm looking at it more critically than I used to. But ultimately it comes down to, there's that Doctor Who quote from Vincent and the Doctor, where the doctor said every life is made up a pile of good things and bad things. You just have to ultimately hope that the pile of good things is just a little bit bigger than the pile of bad things. And I feel the same way about this movie. I feel like there's a pile of good things and there's definitely a pile of bad things.
Yeah.
The pile of bad things is a little bigger than it has been in previous films. But I feel like ultimately when I think about this film, most of what I think about is the pile of good things. And so for that reason, if you ask, do I know what he means? For the most part, I guess ultimately I would say I kind of know what he means. I guess this would probably be a mixed.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I think, yeah, I know what he means. And again, I say that with the fear you had last time, that this might be the last time I can say that.
Yeah.
Because it is the last one that I have any sort of nostalgic tie to.
The goggles are coming off after this one.
Yeah. So, and I mean, what I will say is I do have confidence that we will ultimately find some great Ernest gags in the following films, because that's been consistent throughout.
Sure.
But yeah, I am concerned as well. So yes, ultimately I'm gonna say kind of teetering a little bit more towards the positive, but yeah, it's gonna be interesting going forward. All right. So with that being said, we want to go ahead and let everyone know how they can get into contact with us. So of course you can find us at the Flying Cow Pod on Twitter and Instagram. You can also email me at theflyingcowpod@gmail.com. There is also a Facebook group that you can check out. Do not forget to check out all of our podcasts. I mean, I'm assuming that if you're listening to this, you're a patron. You probably know about most of the other podcasts, but yes, check that out. Also, don't forget to check out Movie Battles on the YouTube channel. Some great stuff there. Loren, go ahead and let us know what you got going on, sir.
I am for anyone in the Atlanta area, I'm going to be in Guys and Dolls out at Sugar Hill in April. Come see that show. It's the Eagle is a beautiful theater. Especially for a local community theater production. Other than that, just find me online. I'm on Twitter at Loren Collins. On some of the other social apps, but don't post on them much at all. So
yeah. All right. Well, once again, we want to thank everyone who listened and or watched. And we will be back next time. We have already mentioned it, but we will be back next time reviewing Ernest Goes to School. Which I will say I have an interesting backstory with that one that I'll clue you guys into the next time that we talk about that. But until then, moo. Know what I mean?
Mm.